Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, thank you to the Warsaw Security Forum for having me. My name is Hadley Gamble. I am the Chief International Anchor for Al Arabiya, as well as a columnist and contributor for Semaphore. Madam President, welcome. You have elections coming up on October 26th. In your mind, will democratic values prevail?
Well, the democratic forces, the pro-European forces in Georgia have always been there. Have always been the very vast majority of the country. They know where is our future. They know that we have no alternative. So I'm very confident that the Georgian population that has been for 30 years, despite the war that we were mentioning, despite all the attempts of Russia to derail the European path of Georgia, 80% of the population over the years steadily is supportive of the European path and the European future. The elections that we're going to have on 26th of October are going to be determining. There are many forces that are at work against the will of the Georgian population, but I'm confident that our future is in Europe. Our future is also defended by Ukraine, as Ukraine is fighting for itself, for its independence. For Europe's freedom, Ukraine is also fighting for our freedom. And the stake of Europe will be determined by the outcome of the war in Ukraine, by the outcome of the elections in Moldova, by the outcome of the elections in Georgia. That will determine, for instance, the security of the Black Sea and the future of the Black Sea as a sea of cooperation, as a sea of peace and connectivity. That will determine the role of Europe in the Caucasus, of Europe and of our Western partners. That will determine the future of Armenia, which is now on its path also towards getting closer to the European Union. So everything that is at stake these days is very important, and more important than anything else, what it has at stake is peace. Peace through the expression of the free will of the people in Georgia as in Moldova.
And the free will of the people, at least with regards to the current government, seems to be one in which democratic freedoms are being rolled back. How dangerous is this new reality for Georgia?
Well, it's dangerous. We are the other side of the coin, that Ukraine is experimenting the military aggression. We're experimenting another type, which is the hybrid war, propaganda, pressure of all kinds, fear that is used, suppression. We have had this Russian law, which is now in action and tries to suppress the civil society, to restrict it. That's what is at stake in the elections. And again, I think that by the elections, the Georgian people will overcome these threats, which are very real. I cannot just minimize them. They're very real, but I'm confident that the strengths of the people, of the Georgians that have lived through very many pressures and fears and struggles to defend their independence and their European future, I'm sure they will overcome.
What do you say to many of those citizens who, as you say, they've lived through 2014? The West was nowhere. They see what happened to Ukraine and they think it's better to just bow down, get through this, and allow Vladimir Putin's influence to spread. What is your message to them? Because there are a lot of those people.
No, there are not a lot of these people, because Georgia has had many experiences with Russia before 2014, before 2008. It started each time Georgia was independent. It started in 1921. It was the same after the independence in 1991. So the Georgian people know that bowing down does not bring peace, does not bring you any form of accommodation with Russia, that it doesn't work.
And yet the current government, though, seems to be doing that.
Well, they're trying to, yes, that's the narrative.
Some people do support this.
Yes, there are some people that will support, although it's a small group that is more around these authorities because of privileges, because of corruption, because of pressure, because of compromise. We are in a situation where we see the replication of Russian modus operandi. And Russian law was a sign of that the authorities, because they cannot gather support any longer, are trying through different methods, through different laws, to really put pressure on the society. But again, I'm confident in the society because we have had enough historic experience to know where is our future.
Given that experience, how likely in your mind is it that Vladimir Putin would take military action if things in Georgia don't go the way he wishes?
That's certainly not an hypothesis that I will voice. And I don't think that Russia is in a position to try that, although you can never say never about anything. But I think that the strategy that Russia is using today in Georgia is to use what has become a proxy, which are the Georgian majority. The Georgian dream has become really a proxy for Russian interests. So that means that their immediate strategy is not a military one. I think that Ukraine is enough for them. I hope so, but I hope that Ukraine will get stronger. I think that the answer to all these threats is really the solidarity around Ukraine, is strengthening the Ukrainian defenses and allowing Ukraine to win the war that they are fighting for us.
Remember, of course, that most analysts did not believe that Vladimir Putin would put boots on the ground in Ukraine, and yet he did. And to your point that you don't foresee this happening in Georgia, what is the plan if it does?
There is no plan if it does, because Georgia is not Ukraine. Georgia doesn't have the military strength. That will be another crisis for you.
We got a lot of them.
You got a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I think that we are not there, and I think that these elections are something for us to defend peacefully, and to express ourselves. I think that the mobilization of the Georgian people in the elections is the real answer today.
Speaking of it all falling on us, and I speak of the collective we of the West, what is your message to those today who would say, it's a lot of money spent on Ukraine, we want this to come to an end, peace at any cost?
There is no peace at any cost. Those of us that know history know that there is no peace at any cost. There is peace only when it's just. There is peace only when the populations have their freedom and when countries have their independence. There will be peace, and I'm convinced of that, the day when Russia will understand that, as any other nation in the world, it has borders it has to respect. It has to know, first of all, where are its borders, respect the borders, respect its neighbors, and accept to be in its own frontiers. That is the only peace that is a lasting peace. What is something
that we in the West should be doing to help Georgia at this point? Because you were talking about the strengthening, obviously, of democratic institutions, but also combating what is a major campaign by the Russians in order to convince people that their lives would be better off in that sphere of influence.
Well, again, I don't think that it's from outside that you can strengthen the inner defense of the people. I think that we have our history, we have our knowledge of Russia. We are more resilient to Russian propaganda than many other countries because we have lived through it. So people see through what is happening. I'm going to give you one example. A few days ago, there were, for the electoral campaign, big posters used by the majority, the ruling party, that described on one side the destruction in Ukraine, and on the other side similar buildings in Georgia that look very fine, and it just started a big uproar in the population because it was so not in line with Georgian culture, with Georgian tradition, to be gloating about one's peaceful living, while the other, the friend, is living in this tragedy.
There was
So
outrage,
it was,
and it was real.
Hmm?
It was outrage, and it was real.
It was outrage, it was real, it was spontaneous, and they had to withdraw some of the videos of the same kind.
Yes.
They couldn't withdraw the billboards.
So your feeling
Yet.
is that all is not lost in this fight.
I'm persuaded that all is not lost. I'm confident, and I'm confident because I know the Georgian people.
Yeah. How concerning is it to you that one of the candidates for the U.S. election has said repeatedly that he wants to put an end to the war in Ukraine, and he would negotiate with Vladimir Putin to do that, and I'm talking about Donald Trump?
I don't know. You know, once you are in responsibility, and it's one thing to say before a number of things, and the other thing is to, when you are in power, what is it that you are going to do? I believe that the American policy is very much a bipartisan policy, at least when it concerns Georgia. We know that it has always been a bipartisan policy. And I guess that concerning Ukraine, it will be a bipartisan policy because the reality on the ground is such that I don't think that any American president can ignore that and just give an easy win to a Russia that really up to now has been losing the war. Because for Russia not be able to win the war after 2.5 years against what it thought that was going to be a 3-day campaign is already a loss.
Yeah. Georgia is a tough place to be an elected official. You found it to be so in your case. Saakashvili is still in prison. In your mind, what needs to happen to the judicial system in Georgia?
Complete reform. That's in line, that's on the Georgian Charter, which has been now signed by all the pro-European parties, which commits to, very early in the next months after the election, to really start a deep reform of the justice system.
Because at this point it seems like a dangerous place to be a politician.
I've been impeached by the Constitutional Court, although there were 3 judges that dissented from that, which is already a reason for hope. So we have to do that, and that has to be done very quickly. And I think that very quickly also we have to, with our European partners and American partners, restart all the process of getting closer to European Union, of getting closer to American partner, to restart the military exercises that have been suspended now until the elections. We have many things to do, and I'm hopeful that we'll be on track.
Do you believe today that Mr. Saakashvili will receive a fair trial?
Well, the trial has been going on. There are many different trials. There is not just one trial. There is nothing that can be fair today in Georgia's tribunals today.
Yeah.
So you'll have to wait for the next.
It's a long time to wait. Finally, Madam President, just walk us through specifically what it is that Georgia needs from Europe and the United States today.
Support to the Georgian population, the moral support, because today there is nothing much in 1 month's time that can be done. Moral support to the Georgian population and lots of observers during the elections, because that's the way that Georgian population is going to feel supported during the elections. Even if the observers cannot really change much to the outcome. They are not interfering with the elections, but they are a sign that we are not alone. What is always the most difficult for Georgia, it's a small country, it's to feel isolated. Isolation is for us the worst nightmare.
Madam President, thank you so much for joining us.